My name is Drake Johnson. I am originally from Arizona. Me and my wife moved to Charleston, West Virginia last year, and now we attend the Boulevard SDA church. Once I was born, a lot of supernatural things started happening in the house. One time, my mother and I, we were in the living room sitting there. We had an ottoman in the middle of the living room, and there was a water bottle that had been on that ottoman for weeks on end, and it got thrown a foot at the wall. And she just looked at it, and this is how normal it was in our household. She looked at it, looked at me, and then said, "Hey, take care of that." Then by the time that I was 13 years old, a new demon had entered into the household. And when that had happened, they tried to send me to therapy, and that therapist had tried to say that I was schizophrenic. And so I ended up getting a photo of this thing sitting on the bed behind me, and that was finally the moment where the therapist admitted and said, "Okay, you're not schizophrenic, get a priest." And so my mom called around for all the priests, and none would come and do that anymore. They said they don't do that, that's not a practice. And essentially what ended up happening was we just sat with it. And we sat with it for a long time. I think it took about a year after that moment. The other demons that were in the household, because there was 3 there at all times, those started to become the ones that I would run to when this demon was present, because of how terrifying this one was compared to the other ones. When I was 13, I decided that was it. I was done with it, and so I decided that that was the day that I was going to commit suicide. I remember just falling down onto the ground on my knees. And when that happened, I ended up just saying, "God, if you're here, save me." And at that moment, his presence filled the room, just completely. And what I like to tell my friends now is, it took demons 13 years to make this whole master scheme, and God took it out in 1 second. And that's just how powerful he is. So I quit school, got my GED, and I started working at a sub shop full-time. And I met my buddy Obed, and he grew up in the SDA church. And then I moved out at 17, and so all my friends were over 21, so I threw a lot of house parties. And he would show up to those parties, and he would stay, and we would sit there and we'd talk for the next 3 hours or so, and he'd leave by 5 a.m. And we would talk about God. What caught my attention with what he would say would be, since I was so nihilistic and cynical at that time, he would say, "That's a lot like Ecclesiastes." And I started reading Ecclesiastes, and when I saw that verse, meaningless, meaningless, everything is meaningless, I was like, okay, all right, he's right. This is like Ecclesiastes. And so I kept reading. Once my wife and I moved to Charleston, West Virginia, and he moved with us. And so he came out here to help for a few months, and he stayed with us for about 3 months or so. And there was a Saturday when we finally had nothing to do. And so he came down the stairs, and he was like, "What are we doing today?" And I was like, "Nothing." And he was like, "We're going to church." So I decided that day, I made a prayer to God, and I said, "God, if you make me think about things I don't want to think about during this sermon, I'll stay at this church." So that entire sermon Pastor Walter was doing, I did not like what I was thinking about at all. I was praying and asking for God to bring me more people that I could talk to about the Bible like I do with Obed. And then all of a sudden one day, Pastor Walter and Elder Gary, they asked if we wanted to do Bible studies. And I was like, yes, of course. It was just their grace and their patience and the way that they taught with such clarity, where I could really see the truth behind the scriptures, and it just enlightened, I guess, the knowledge of Christ. I decided this is it. I need to be baptized. So God has called me in a specific direction that was never on my plans. but God has called me in a specific direction to become a pastor of the SDA church. Never on Obed's plan either. And so when I entered into the church, he was like, "I didn't mean for you to do that." But God has called me to a specific plan And I know the first step is becoming a pastor for his plan and for his glory. And so with all the fighting that I did with myself over it, I've come to realize that his plan is above all. And I could fight it all I want, but I'm not going to like the outcome if I fight it. And just the amount of love that's grown in my heart towards him and towards his creation is just, that's what's keeping me going on it. If you're watching this and you've experienced these things and you feel alone or feel trapped, right now you can call out to Christ. And in a second, he will take you out of it. If you do that with your heart fully in it, you will know that you're not alone.